she unfortunately had to, or fortunately really, had to go to a meeting with Google today. So she asked that I chair this session today. And we're really excited to also have Paula Fray, a familiar face, a familiar person in the industry, and also amazing trainer. Some of us perhaps may have joined yesterday's session. So this is the second day we're hearing from her with an amazing session that she did yesterday about compliance and about running the business of news for media entrepreneurs in South Africa. We are in the business of news, and I think today is also going to be pretty much a continuation as well to a point. But today we're going to be focusing really about, as you can see over there, writing winning proposals. And I think this is in light of the DNT Fund. Initially, we wanted to host the a session where we will talk about business, writing business plans, etc. But then we realized that with the DNT fund, it's not really a must for a business plan, but they want a operational plan instead. So I'm sure that Paula has pivoted quite a bit to align herself with pretty much what the members are excited to hear about today. So thank you so much, Paula. I don't think we need to introduce you. Paula is from, I don't know which hat you're wearing, either the Fray Foundation or Fray Intermedia or Fray College, but I think Fray Foundation, perhaps that's the hat you'll be wearing today. So Paula, thank you so much for availing yourself and your time, and always your trainings have always been really amazing. So colleagues, how we're going to do this today is we're going to have 2 hours from 10 o'clock ending at 12 o'clock, allowing for more time to unpack this information. Please do use the comment box on the right-hand side so that Valent and myself can just monitor the kind of questions, and we will just jump in at times when Paula wants to engage with us. We'll read those questions, and then we will also allow some time at the end for any Q&A if you'd like to ask other questions that might have come up. So thank you so much, Paula, and I think I've done most of the talking for 2 minutes. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. And really, it's great to be with everyone. I'm wearing my Fray Foundation hat today. And as Chris was saying, yesterday we did a really good session with Nigel Magamu and Mbali Ngetwe from Fray College. Nigel, formerly of Chat 263, well, still owns Chat 263, but is now working with a global cross-border journalism entity. Just really talking about the how of becoming compliant and making sure that your business is ready for scaling. And I think, Chris, the one thing that really stood out was one thing that Chris said, that Nigel said yesterday, that you can't scale chaos. You can't scale chaos. You can't grow if you don't have structures and processes in place. And so when you look at today's presentation, I think it actually aligns to yesterday's presentation. So if you want to, you can actually catch it up on the Frame Media Foundation's website and on YouTube. We've got yesterday's session up on YouTube already. And just really practical advice about how to be compliant. What I'm doing is for today's session, we really are looking at what the Digital Transformation Fund is looking for now. But if you're not in round 2, if you're thinking about applying, if you're thinking about your business, if you're thinking about writing proposals going forward, then all of this will really help you. You don't need to have a business plan, but you do need to have a project plan or a strategy plan for what you want to achieve. So we're going to look at phase 2 expectations. We're going to look at in detail the application process, what we need in each section. We'll look at the application, and then we will look at the budget. It's really interesting because last night it was one of those last minute deadlines. Fray College was applying for a proposal, and all the heads in the room were just really thinking about, about what are we going to ask for in terms of the budget. And budgeting is really one of the hardest things. And so I've kind of used some of the things that we did last night just to finalize our budget and include it in today's presentation. So if you have moved from phase 1 to phase 2, first of all, congratulations. When you making your application, emailing your application, you're going to need to have a big package of things. You're going to need to have your completed application form. You're going to need a project plan, which is a maximum of 10 pages with the template that we're going to go through. The difficult thing is going to be the detailed line item budget. And the reason why it's difficult is because it really must align with your project plan. And so you need to really give some thought and investment into that. And then obviously you need your organizational documents, and then you will need your financial documents as outlined in the plan. Then remember, when you are looking at proposals, whether it's this proposal or it's a proposal for the International Women's Media Fund or for another media entity, you really have to go back to understand what the funder is looking for, because the funder also has to show impact to their donors. If somebody is giving you money, for example, for climate change stories, it's because somebody else has given them money to promote climate change stories in media. Um, you can't then decide that because you're special, they're going to make an exception for you and they're going to allow you to do stories that focus on women that don't have a link to climate change, because the fund itself really has an objective. And so when you look at the Digital News Transformation Fund, it has a very clear objective. Its objective is to help local and independent publishers grow digitally, produce impactful journalism, and build long term sustainability. Don't be too literal about that. Don't go and say, I am going to do a project, a digital project to produce impactful journalism and build long term sustainability. Really have a project that when you explain how that project works, it ticks off all of the boxes in terms of what you're looking at. Even if you made it through to round two and your initial suggestion was perhaps too big, was overly ambitious, etc., at this stage what you need to do is to make sure that your project for phase two is practical, that it can be sustained, and that it delivers public interest work. So let's start. We're going to be very, very thorough. And I really, because I can't see the chat, Chris and Valent, if there are any questions, any comments, people who want to speak, please feel free to stop me. But I want to say that at this stage, when you are looking at your application, it's really important that you start off knowing, um, you know, you've had some time to mull over your application. What are the things that you were uncomfortable with? What are the things that you might want to change? So, a couple of things about this application. It needs to be a maximum of 10 pages. If you are, and in those 10 pages, you need to have sufficient detail for the person who's reviewing your proposal to clearly understand what you are suggesting. Do not to have all of the questions answered, and to really have a good sense in their mind of what the outcome is going to be. At the same time, you don't want to have so much detail that you go over 10 pages. Um, you want to have enough detail for clarity, but not too much detail. You want to keep to the structure that they have recommended. And the reason for this is that quite often that when it comes down to one or two issues that they need to decide against on each proposal, it's really important for the panel to be able to do quick comparisons across other proposals, but also to be able to find the detail that they're looking for really quickly. So use the structure provided, keep your writing concise, make it practical, and always be focused on outcomes, right? What are you going to achieve? How does this align to what they're looking for? I was telling you about our proposal yesterday. So when we were doing the budget, and this is why I want to strongly advise that you don't do this on deadline. I know that as journalists, we often find the pressure of deadline to be stimulating, but because you want to make sure that your narrative and your budget is aligned, you want to give a lot of time to really, when you're finalizing your budget, to be able to go back to your narrative What we found, for example, last night is that when we were finalizing the budget, we needed to go back to the narrative to make sure that the narrative was consistent with what we were asking for. And so those things are really important. You can't have a budget that is amazing and detailed, but when you're reading the actual proposal, you don't see where these elements in the budget are. If, for example, in the budget you're asking um, for funding for a developer to support the organization in developing a newsletter, then the narrative must be very, very clear about how the newsletter fits into your objectives, fits into your ultimate outcome. And then at this stage, at the money stage, one of the things that we're always asking is, can this be done? Right? I mean, sometimes the budget is amazing, it's big. Um, um, I've actually had cases where I've sat on panels where the narrative was amazing, and then we look at the budget and we say, hang on a second, this budget is too small for this project that is being proposed. So you want to think about, right? Is it practical? Is it achievable? What can be done? How can this be done? How does the project link to what is being proposed? Then, so is it practical and achievable? The idea of giving money, and you'll see in a lot of proposal and calls for proposals, people are asking, if we give you this money to do this, what is the long-term sustainability? Right? Nobody wants to give money for a project over a year that is only going to be sustained for a year. What people are looking for is the opportunity to give money, and for that money to really launch the organization to keep on doing what it is doing, or to expand what it's doing going forward. So really think about how are you going to be sustainable beyond the grant. And why is this important? Because it might be that, yes, you're asking for a particular thing, but when you think about sustainability, it might be that you're asking for other money. Yes, I want to, apologies, I want to develop an app, but in order for the app to be sustainable after the lifespan of this project, I'm also asking you for funding to promote the use of the app, so that after the lifespan of this project, the 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 app would have been embedded in the community's day-to-day news consumption. So you're asking for funding for something. Make sure that whatever you're asking for is going to be sustainable, and if not, ask yourself what you can do to make it sustainable. And then, because of who's funding this particular grant, you need to be able to show that either you're going to increase your digital reach, build or and retain your audiences, um, diversify your current revenue streams for a more sustainable business, or to strengthen your community engagement. And it's really a good idea if you are a single person working in a community doing a community publication, that perhaps you sit down with another community journalist and ask these hard questions, right? Is this practical? Is this sustainable? Have somebody have a look at it and give you really harsh feedback, because it's worth it if you can actually then answer all of these questions in your grant. I want to say that everyone who can access ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude or whatever artificial intelligence they're using can produce a a um, a proposal these days, right? Everyone can do that. And to be quite honest, if I read some of the proposals I'm getting, it's quite clear that people are doing that. And I'm not saying don't use it. In fact, I would encourage you to use AI responsibly, and to support you. But what AI can't do for you is think about your community's needs, is to be able to be innovative about what the project is actually going to be. And so for me, because AI can actually, reduce us to all saying the same thing, doing the same thing, asking for the same thing, I want to make it absolutely clear that the proposal that stands out is the proposal that has a clear vision, that is practical, and that has community impact. And you can't have community impact if you don't know your community. If if you're using ChatGPT to write a proposal for a rural South African community, when AI is trained on people who have the greatest access to the internet, you're going to get bland, information that is going to sound good on paper, but when the person who's looking at it says, is this practical? Is this going to have community impact? They're going to have second thoughts because you're going to sound like everyone else and you're not going to sound like somebody who's trying to create a media product for the community that they're serving. So I really want you to be invested in your community, in the issues that you're trying to solve in your community, and in recognizing that in this AI era, that's your USP. The fact that you understand your community better than anyone else. The fact that you can identify the problems of your community better than anyone else. And I really do want to just stress that because I think I am not saying don't use ChatGPT or any AI because AI is a useful tool. What I'm saying is that the thinking part is what makes you stand out as much as possible. So just to check, I'm Kristen Valent, if there are any questions or comments, and then we're going to go through the application in detail. So any comments?
No
No?
comments thus far.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. So let's get into the application. The application actually is quite similar to what you had before. And it has a very, very structured flow. And it starts with the executive summary. My advice is you write the executive summary last. You write the executive summary after you have a full proposal and you know what you want to put in there. The executive summary, very often, quite frankly, if there are thousands and thousands of proposals, the executive summary is quite often the only thing that the panel reads. And so don't think of the executive summary as simply a summary. It is the point at which you really build a case for why your project is a standout project. You want to include in your executive summary what the project is about, why it matters now, right? I mean, this is why I'm saying anyone can write an AI strategy. When you identify why your project matters for your community and the people that it's going to impact, it helps stand out from the rest. What you're hoping to achieve with your project, and again, this is the point at which you will go back to the project design, not the project design, the fund design. What is the fund hoping to achieve? Show how what you're hoping to achieve aligns to that. And then the last thing you want to say in your summary is budget and funding tier requested. Yes, you can use AI probably to write the summary, but if you're doing that, make sure that AI has very, very clearly highlighted the project specs, why your project matters, what you're hoping to achieve, and the budget and funding requested. As I said, I would write the executive summary when I'm finished with everything else, because then, and probably even when I'm finished with the budget, because then it would really help me. I would have checked it and cross-checked everything, and then the executive summary is really an accurate reflection of it. Keep your executive summary short, write it last for clarity. Your problem statement. Yes, you've probably written some of this already in the first round. But if now is the time to really rethink everything, make sure that you're clear, make sure that you're practical. If you come from round 1 to round 2 and there are changes, that's absolutely fine as long as they are clearly expressed about what you're trying to do. Your problem statement is the why. You know, why are you going to do what you're going to do? And so it really starts off by understanding your audience and the people that you're working for. What are their needs? What are their desires? What are your needs? Can you meet their needs? What is your ability to be able to provide for the community that you're serving? And that's when you identify your why, um, it really helps you with your objectives, helps you with your project, helps to really be able to see your impact. In your problem statement, you want to include what problem you're solving. Who is affected by that problem, right? Is it your community? Is it women? Is it girls? Is it grandmothers? Is it school children, right? Who is affected? Why is it urgent or important now? You know, there are lots of different problems that we can all identify. Why have you chosen this one? And then if there's background or context, and again here, you know, I would say look at something like WASI Map that can align Stats SA data with other data that gives you a really good background to your community. To really, what you're doing is you're building evidence for the people who are making a decision on whether or not to choose. Make sure that your problem statement is clear and accessible. Never assume that the person who's reading your proposal understands your issues. Never assume that everyone knows that unemployment amongst young people is an issue. Never assume that everyone knows anything. Always make sure that your reader needs to have the proper background, the proper context. When you have clearly identified your problem, and you might need to tweak your problem in phase 2, might need to kind of update, make sure then. Once you've identified your problem, right, it becomes a lot easier to develop SMART goals. And I want to say that the reason why you want to develop SMART goals, and by SMART, I mean, right, it's simple, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's realistic, and it's time bound. Um, when your goals are specific, when your goals are measurable, when they're achievable, when they're realistic, when they're time bound, it makes it easier at the other end of the process to do monitoring and evaluation. And so, I mean, all of these things, you know, for me, a proposal is like a strategy. It's a logical flow. I have a problem. My problem leads to a objective, what I want to do. The objective leads to activities. The activity leads to outcomes. The outcomes are then measured, evaluated, monitored. And once they are done, I can begin to see impact down the line. Impact is what the donor is looking for themselves. Outcomes is what we're looking for in the initial phases of our project. When you do your objectives, have 2 to 4. Don't have, you know, in fact, I'm inclined to think 4 might be a bit too much, right? I mean, I like 3 because it's achievable in a year, 2 years, 3 years. Very, very clear. I'm not spread thin. I'm not trying to do all kinds of things. The verb you use in your objective to increase audience, to build a website for engagement, to launch, make it very action oriented. Don't say, you know, understand, and make it very, very action oriented. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And then go back. You know, does it deal with digital reach? Does it deal with audience? Does it deal with revenue? Does it deal with community? Have very, very clear goals. Make sure that they are smart. Make sure that they can be measured, that they are specific, that they're not so broad that it's impossible for the funder to be able to think about how you're going to actually use them.
Can I suggest I want to take some of the questions now?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll hand over to Chris to read them out to you.
Yeah, no, go ahead if you want then.
Okay, you just said something now about you said something very interesting about outcome versus impact, and how it. Sorry, I was muted. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
you can.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. You just said something earlier about impact versus outcomes and the difference between the two and what it means to the funder versus what it means to us. I didn't quite catch it. If you could just repeat that.
So very often we confuse outcomes with impact, but in fact, outcomes is a step towards impact. And so, for example, Varashni, if you look at the impact that the digital fund is trying to achieve is to be able to engage more South Africans online and to help build more sustainable media, right? So the impact is building a sustainable media, but to get to impact, you as a media entity need to put in place a lot of different steps, and those steps lead to outcomes. And so they might be building a upgrading our website, building an app, having audience campaigns to grow audience numbers, a whole lot of different things. When you think of, in some of the funders, for example, they will separate their applications to what is your input you need. And so, for example, you might say, I need funding in order to to do social media promotion. So the input is social media promotion. The output from that is more people are aware of our website. The impact is that more people are using the website and therefore are informed about the issues on the website. So the outcome is that people are actually using the website, but the impact is what they do with what's happening on the website. Impact very often isn't measured immediately like outcomes is. Impact is measured down the line as we begin to see people engaging with the issues that community media talks about, as we begin to see a more sustainable community media, because people recognize that community media engages local communities or specific community members. So impact, input, what you need in order to achieve something. Output is or outcome is what you get from doing that. But the impact is the collective sustained change that happens over time. And impact doesn't happen immediately. You don't have a social media campaign and then necessarily have immediate impact unless you have a very, very large social media campaign. And sometimes you can see that, for example, when you have advocacy campaigns that go national and they have huge campaigns, you can begin to see impact, and people begin, the language changes, people's attitudes. In a case like COVID, where wearing a mask is a matter of life and death, you can see impact, behavior change, impact immediately. But most of the time, impact is over a longer period of time. So really think about that, and what do you need in order to have your output, but how are you going to sustain? And that's when they're asking about sustainability down the line, I think it's really important that you think about it. I want to spend a minute on that actually, and give you an example. When they ask how are you, what the donor doesn't want is to give you money and you do the project and it's a wonderful project, but after the project is finished, that's it. You don't have money to continue. You don't have money to you haven't built up something that can be sustained. So really think about, while I'm doing this project, what else do I need to do in order to make this sustainable? And it could be something as simple as, while I have this funding, I'm going to use the higher visibility of the funding to promote myself to other advertisers. While I have this funding, I'm going to use the higher visibility to test new products, to do new things, right? So that the funding ends, and then you have other green shoots that are happening. One of the biggest lessons I learned as a small business owner was that sometimes when you do a big project like this, it can be all consuming, and you do it and you show incredible results and everyone is amazed at what you've done. and then the project ends, and suddenly you find yourself with no business. We are small businesses. We need to be constantly thinking about the next thing, the next thing. And the way we make this project sustainable is to make sure that we're building in a sustainability plan from in the way forward. If you're shifting right from round one to round two, um, you can explain it really, really. I mean, within your proposal. And the reality is that AI, the impact of AI is so dramatic that if things are static, then you must be doing something wrong. Because the reality is that even today, there are things that we can do today that we might not have been able to do 3 months ago. And so, yes, if things have changed, just make a note that what has changed. It doesn't need to be a big issue because at phase two, they really are looking at the practical elements of it. Tabella is asking if you forgot in phase one to include a problem statement, can you include them in phase two? So Tabella, yes. If in phase two you realize that the problem you're dealing with is changed or different, put it in. Let me just be clear about why we put the problem statement in. The problem statement leads to your objectives. Your objectives leads to the activities and therefore the funding you're asking for. The problem statement is critical to argue why you need this money for the project you want to be able to do. So if your problem statement needs to be changed, needs to be tweaked, etc., that's fine. But all of this must be very logical. Problem statement, objective, activities, funding. All of it must be logical so that it actually makes sense about why you're asking for what you're asking for. Okay, let's go back to the presentation, and I hope I can do this right because I can see that I'm still sharing, but I have no idea of where I am. Okay, so
you're on work plan activities
Work
and
plan and
timeline.
activities. Yeah.
Okay, great, and you can see it on the screen, right? So yeah. Then for the work plan, you can see that now there really is, it becomes more granular, right? What are the activities? What are the tasks? And when are they going to start? When are they going to end? And who's going to be responsible for this? It actually is worth just working this through with a team, getting people to really think about what you want to do. Don't make it too granular. Don't put in, so for example, if you're doing launch newsletter, don't put in newsletter design, blah, 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 unless it has the potential risk attached to it. So for example, if one of your outcomes is to launch a newsletter and have a certain number of subscribers by the end date, unless design is a risk, unless if your team is small and you're thinking that the website and the newsletter and all of these campaigns is really going to stretch your team, um, then add something into the work plan activity. Otherwise, try and keep launch newsletter, redesign website, right? And then it gives you that flexibility to change things around slightly within that. You can see the task. I mean, launching the newsletter, give your a start date and end date. And again, it's not enough to have a list of activities. When I'm looking at somebody's work plan, I'm again looking at, is this doable? Is this realistic? Has this person thought through it? Um, and I've been on panels where we've actually declined a really good proposal because the work plan or the budget just didn't reflect that the person understood the amount of work that was needed for a quality product, right? So amazing proposal, but when you look at the budget, right, everything is it doesn't reflect that the person understands the amount of work that is required. And so what your work plan and your activities do really is to give the funder an idea, that you very, very clear on what needs to be done and understand the process, but it also gives them an ability to see the spread of work across your project, how they would be able to monitor it, how they would be able to just kind of have a process of ensuring that things get on track. So when you're thinking of your activity list, don't be overly granular, but do make sure that you're reflecting all of the key activities that need to be done so that the person can see that you do in fact understand what needs to be done. So the activities, not every activity necessarily has a deliverable, right? I mean, if you, for example, if you're launching a newsletter, there is a deliverable in that it's a newsletter. But if you're promoting the newsletter, the deliverable might actually be slightly different. If you're having a community gathering, the deliverable is not just that the community is kind of meeting the team. The deliverable might also be sign-ups to the newsletter, different things. So the deliverables and milestones also reflect to the funder that you have a clear understanding of what your outputs are and how over a period of time you will be able to show proof of progress. If you understand the activity, um, um, the workflow, then you can set yourself very clear milestones. Be careful. And this is something I learned. Don't offer deliverables within a month or a few weeks, or don't dive in to your project delivery in your first week or your second week. Don't say at the end of month one, you're going to have this and this and this and this. And I actually learned that lesson from working with global organizations because I was always really worried about showing progress, showing that we could do things. And I would promise that really from day one, I was going to start delivering. You want to have a set up process. You want to have 1 to 3 months of right inception meetings, finalizing the work plan. If you're hiring staff, you want at least 3 months to hire and do induction for staff. You want to really prepare your, even if you start on some of the activities before you're supposed to, that's fine. But if you say, in month one, I'm going to deliver you my newsletter, my this, and this, you're setting yourself up for failure. Give yourself a starting point to really embed the project. Make sure that you put in place your monitoring and evaluation. Make sure that you put in place all of the things, and then start your delivery from your second quarter. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest lessons I learned in doing projects. Is I always wanted to show that I can deliver, and so from month one I'm delivering. But in fact, you want to spend time making sure that all your, all your I's are dotted, all your T's are crossed before you then start rolling out the process. For your deliverables, right, you want to identify all of the things that you will produce: a report, an event, a platform, an app, a campaign. Then these are things that you will produce over the period of the project. Then being able to identify your milestones. So my advice is give yourself that initial phase where you're putting things up, and then start your milestones. In 6 months' time, right, I would have prepped for the campaign, done this, done this, done. In 9 months' time, we would have had our first campaign. In a year, we will show this, 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 this. Milestones really mark your progress. Sometimes you need to also think about, okay, what are the low-hanging fruit here? What is a milestone that I can put up that I know that I can achieve so that I can show myself and I can show my team and I can show the funder some progress, right? If you're already working on a newsletter, maybe the easiest thing for you to do is to redesign your newsletter and do a campaign. You're already working on a newsletter, you have a really good idea of how to improve it. It's an easy milestone to put into your project. It's a good way. What you don't want to do is to put the most difficult thing as a milestone in your project and end and fall at the first hurdle. So deliverables are the things you produce, and milestones are your progress markers. What are you going to do when? Um, this particular application asks for due dates and what it calls dependencies. In some other proposals, the dependencies are sometimes called risks, right? As in, um, your first newsletter is due on the 1st of December, but what are the risks or what are the assumptions that we're making here? And the assumption is I will have my first newsletter by the 1st of December if I have a design for my newsletter by the 1st of November. Then, so due dates and dependencies are those assumptions. Make sure that you don't overpromise. Make sure that you're actually very, very realistic. So, what is my first milestone? I want 100 newsletter signups. Ask yourself, don't think that because suddenly you have money that everything is going to rocket, right? If it's difficult to get people to sign up for newsletters now, it's going to be difficult for people to sign up for newsletters then. And even if you have money for a campaign, you're going to spend some time doing some A/B testing, trying best practice. What is the best way to get people to sign up? What will make people want to sign up? And so the initial phases, things might be slow and they might speed up. Of course, it might be the other way around. Maybe things are fast in the initial stages and then they slow down going on. But be very, very realistic. Ask yourself, is it realistic to put 1,000 newsletter signups? There's a balance that you want to keep here, right? Because you don't want the number of newsletter signups to be so low that it feels like, why would I pay 10,000 Rand for a campaign so you can have 100 newsletter sign-ups? We may as well just go and pay people 100 Rand to sign up for a newsletter. Um, all of this is what is important to actually capture in your newsletter. What are the challenges? What are the risks that you're mitigating? What are the assumptions you're making around when you are deciding on how many newsletter signups you want for your milestones? What are the assumptions you're taking into consideration? um, and the assumption might be people don't like to give their email. People are reluctant to share their personal information online now because of misinformation and disinformation, because of online scams. Or it could be before we get people to sign up for a newsletter, we have to help them sign up for a Gmail address. All of those things are things that you want to actually look at. So the deliverable could be your website launch. Your due date might be November 25. What is the evidence for that? How are we going to verify it? I've got a list of subscribers. I've got a website that is active. What is the dependency? And as I said, this could also be your assumption, right? This can only happen if the newsletter is launched in May. This can only happen if the design is completed by April. And I would imagine that ChatGPT is really good about identifying the risks, deliverables, milestones, etc. And I'm not saying don't use it, but then just make sure that these are actually real deliverables and milestones for you, that they're not generic deliverables and milestones based on ChatGPT's machine learning for organizations like the New York Times or the Financial Times, right? It can certainly help you think about the kinds of things you're looking for, but remember, we have a very, very different environment and you need to stick to that. Key performance indicators. I like this because, how am I going to measure my success? One of my favorite questions is, what does success look like to me? What does success look like to you? If the funding that we get helps us to be able to grow our online audience, then what will success look like to me? It means that more people come to my website. How many more people? 10% more people? 5% more people? How are you going to decide what is a good indicator? Well, this is where you go back to your problem statement and your context. If the research shows that your community has a 30% online access, right? Internet penetration in your community is 30%. And your community, or certainly the community who can access the internet, is about um, 10,000 people. Then I'm going to say is a 30% internet access. There are 10,000 people who are of adult age.
So,
30% of
so
10,000 people might be 3,000. I'm going to come now to you. So
Yeah.
3,000. And then I'm going to say, realistically, of those 3,000 people, how many people can I actually try to reach out to? So, yeah.
sorry to
Then,
backpedal, Paula, before you go to the KPIs, I see there's a question there by Dubros. If you could just read that one before you move on. I think Varishni is also wanting to have clarity.
So, Louise, so I wanted to clarify, while we may intend to apply for 3 years of funding, must this proposal process and the information we provide only include the first years of activity and budget? So the 3 year funding, from what I understand, is given annually, and so when you are looking at it, it depends on your ability to be able to actually deliver on the first year. When I look at the budget, Louise, the budget template, I mean, it certainly does seem to be looking at a years long budget, but maybe when Kate comes back in, she can confirm if we need all 3 years or if we just have one. I mean, if I look at the budget now, it does look like it is looking at 1 year's budget, but Kate could probably speak to that a lot more. Does that help, Louise?
Hi, Paula. Kate is on the line. I think
Okay,
she'll
brilliant.
jump in and off. And I
Hi,
just
yes,
wanted to
Kate.
check in with you in terms of,
Hi.
yeah, because we didn't want to disturb you mid-presentation. I think maybe after a slide or two, can you just check in with me, just say, V, do you have any questions so that I don't disturb your flow? Just wanted to check in with
Absolutely.
you. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, no, that's fine.
Hi, everybody. Sorry for being late for this meeting. So yeah, I mean, my understanding is it's 1 year. It's 1 year of funding that you are putting in for. So because also just the way that the funding works is it's on a year by year basis. I mean, you could be putting in something which is a bigger project which you're wanting money over a number of years, but for this particular budget you're putting it in just for a single year. But I mean, I think what's useful about this workshop is that I think there are going to be a number of questions that are going to come up and we aren't necessarily going to know the answers. But because we're doing it now, we've then got time to go back to Shikalulu and say to them, in terms of how you are organizing this, like just clarify that for us and just confirm that. But yeah, that's my understanding. Thanks, Paula.
Thanks, and we are going to talk a little bit about budget because I think because the phase two application is quite similar to phase one. It just means that when we have to go back, we have to make more detail and we need to make sure that we're absolutely clear. I think one of the biggest issues that we're going to have is actually the budgeting of it, and so we're going to spend a little bit on the budget and the things that might actually that we really need to think about when we're doing the budget. For me, budgeting when I'm doing the programming, when I'm doing a proposal, is the most difficult part. We're always thinking about how much can I ask for, will it be too much, will it be too little? And so I think that when you align your budget to the actual activities that link back to your explanation in the narrative, I think it doesn't, I mean, it's less about how much you're asking for and more about the fact that you've actually shown that this budget has value. So we will talk about budget a bit more, but let me just finish off the KPI section and then we can get to that. So remember we spoke about the objectives and we said in the objectives that we wanted to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound for our objectives. And we wanted to use active verbs, right? Increase, engage, etc. In our goals. And so when you begin to think about how will you measure success for the KPIs, for the key performance indicators, and for the targets, this is where, and again, remember, we go back to what is the funder trying to do? Wants to increase audience growth, wants to build sustainable media by diversifying revenue generated, wants to engage with our communities. And so the indicators really begin to think through that. For one of the things that is useful to know is where you are right now. If you're asking for money to increase your audience, again, that begins to say, how many people come to your website right now? How many people come to your Facebook page right now? What's your baseline? So, and then how are you going to measure it, right? I mean, so then what are you going to measure? From where are you going to measure? So where are you now? What's your baseline now? And where do you want to go in the period that you're looking at? You don't want to underpromise, but you don't want to overpromise as well. And by that I mean you don't want to say, I'm going to build a website and I'm going to have 1,000 people on my website by the end of the year. What you want to do is you want to kind of give yourself a realistic target. There are 300,000 people in my community with access to the internet. I want to get at least 1% of those people by the end of this program. And in order to do that, I'm going to engage them with a period of campaigns over 12 months. And so in the first quarter, I want to have so many people. In the second quarter, I want to have so many people. In the third quarter, I want to have a competition to get people to basically kind of tag themselves with our website in order to get more people. And so really what that does is it also helps you begin to think about what do I need to do with my activities in order to meet these targets. So for your KPIs, your indicators, know where you are now, what your audience is, what your engagement is, etc., and then know where you want to go at the end of the process. And again, in the proposal, they make it quite clear what they're looking for. If the indicator is audience size, then your current baseline of how many subscribers you've got, and then maybe you want to increase your target by 25%, and so you have a 5,000. Oh God, I hope that's right. I might have done my calculations wrong. There's part of me that's thinking maybe from 4,000 to 5. No, it's right. It's right. There's 25%. For a minute there, I thought it was 20%, but it's 25%. From 4,000 to 5,000 is a 25% increase. And then when do you want to see that 25% increase? 6 months from the start. And how are you going to provide that evidence? You've got your website analytics, you've got your social media dashboard, and then be careful about the reporting frequency, right? There's some things that you want to report on a monthly basis. There's some things that you want to report on a quarterly basis, and there's some things that you want to report on an annual basis. The shift. So, for example, if you're talking about something that is slow to grow, like subscribers are people who pay to be on your website. That growth is slow. You're not going to get changes in your subscribers from week to week, right? You're going to get changes in your subscribers maybe from month to month or from quarter to quarter. However, if you are increasing the number of followers on your Facebook, for example, then and you have a campaign, then you might want to measure that week by week while you're doing the campaign. You want to measure it so that in fact you can see the changes during the campaign. So if you've got a 6-week campaign, then you're not going to measure it at the end of the campaign. You're going to measure it every week during the campaign so that you can make necessary changes as and when you if you think things aren't shifting. If they are shifting, you can see what's working and then repeat it. Risks and mitigation, then. It's absolutely clear that you can go to ChatGPT and identify risks. But again, ChatGPT is really kind of looking, broadly speaking, at quite generic things. If you can show that you actually know the risks and mitigations in your own area, I think that's really important. There are a couple of areas that the actual application suggests you look at. And those areas are operational, financial, legal, tech, including AI, ethics, and then other risks. So, right. So think about what potential risks there are, and then think about what the funder isn't going to eliminate a proposal because they've identified risks. When you identify risks, it shows you that you've thought ahead, that you anticipate that something might go wrong. And remember, I once wrote a proposal, $1 million proposal that had huge risks, absolutely huge risks. And we put all of the risks in, and we identified what we would do. So we were working with supporting women politicians across the African continent, and of course, you can imagine what kind of risks there would be there. But we put all of those risks in. But we also then said how we would mitigate it. If we couldn't work in this country, we would go to this country. If we couldn't do this, we would do that. And because we had actually put that into the proposal, the funder was willing to actually give us the funding because they knew that we had a proposal that anticipated if things went wrong and gave us and we had the ability to be able to really make adjustments. What the risks and mitigation section of a proposal does is show that you've thought ahead. It shows that you have a clear understanding of what you need to do, and that and if things don't go according to plan, that you also know and have anticipated what you could do instead. So in your risks and mitigation, you want to show what risks you've identified, what mitigation steps you're taking. So in other words, what you'll do to reduce the risk, and if the risk happens, what you could in fact do in order to mitigate that, and then who the person is that's responsible for that. So let me give you some examples. For an operational risk, and this is an example actually given in the proposal, you're a small team, you might not meet deadlines. How are you going to mitigate that? Maybe you'll hire freelancers. Maybe you'll hire a part-time editor. Financial risk. Your revenue experiment might fail. Do we have a question? Financial risk. Maybe you try the subscriber thing and it doesn't happen, and that's fine. Legal risk. Right? Are there copyright issues for images? You're going to use only open source or free things. AI risk. AI may create bias. You're going to add a human review before publishing. I want to say that for AI, for journalism, I think a human review is an absolute basic. If you're putting in AI as a potential risk, if you're using AI in your journalism, it cannot be without human oversight of everything that AI is doing or AI is producing. And so really think about that, think about what needs to be done in order to mitigate the risk. And then, I mean, you want to actually put it out as per the spreadsheet. What is the risk? What are you going to do to reduce the risk? Who's going to actually monitor and act on that risk? And then what is the risk left after the actions that you've taken? Again, what the funder is trying to see is that you've anticipated what can go wrong and anticipated how you're going to actually act with it. The second last section of it is probably one of the most important sections, and that's the sustainability element. Precisely because we're looking for sustainability, we're looking for projects that actually have longevity. What you want to show is how your project is going to live beyond the grant. And again, I want to go back to my recommendation, right? Make sure that even in thinking about your project, you're thinking about your sustainability levers, right? If you're doing this project and it's going to give you heightened visibility, what can you do to use that heightened visibility to build sustainability? Can you do an advertising campaign? Can you use the heightened visibility to find other funders? What are you going to do during the lifespan of this project that will really make it more sustainable? How are you going to expand your revenue streams? How are you going to really ensure that your community benefits? Make the sustainability very, very practical, right? Don't say what you're going to do. Say how you're going to make it sustainable. Say what about the project will give you a foundation, right? The- If you're asking for money for a website, then then um, then the fact that you have a website also means that you have an advertising platform, or you have a platform on which to sell other um, um, income generating activities, sponsored content, advertising, etc. If you're asking money for membership engagement, then you are creating a a community of readers, of community members who engage with you, but that you can then go to civil society organizations and partner with them on community campaigns around health issues, around gender, etc. Really think through how you're going to ensure that your organization lives through this. If you're doing something around AI or data for your project, then you have to show how you're going to ensure the responsible use of AI. I think if you're using AI in your editorial, then you need to make sure that you actually have an AI policy, or you're doing something to ensure human review of AI content. What the section on ethical AI is also looking for is that you're POPIA compliant. If you're collecting, if we're going to collect our users' data, then we need to make sure that that data isn't shared willy-nilly across the newsroom, that somebody is responsible for it, that we have a person who's actually making sure that we are compliant. How do we make sure that we are not writing AI generated stories that have very little relevance for the community we serve? How do we avoid bias? How do we avoid harm? How do we fact check our AI stories? How do we write all of those things that we need to be looking at? How are we going to secure our data? How are we going to share our data? Right? So it's quite important, A, that you show that you're thinking about it, and B, that you're taking some safeguards. For me, the AI, the human overview of AI is a given. You just want to make absolutely sure, right, that you are not letting anything go into your newsroom that has not been checked, into your website, into your news services, with not making sure that that a human being has actually looked at it. So let's move then to partnerships and roles. With partnerships and roles, and this is, I mean, if you are doing a partnership for your proposal, then it's quite important that you show who your partners are, what level of agreement you have with your partners, and what roles different people might take. If you're on your own, then this is not important. But if you are doing it with a group of partners, then you need to show who they are, how or what governs your partnership. Is there an agreement? And then who does what? Who reports to the funder? Who does what element of the program, etc. If you are using partnerships, then it's important to show how the partnership is going to strengthen your project. You don't simply want to put in partners. Um, a lot of funders like partnerships, but you also want to be careful about how you are putting in partnerships. So I'm going to pause there for a second and just stop sharing, because so that's the application process. Initially, I thought that the application process was actually going to include M&E, but the M&E information is going to come separately, and the guidance for M&E will come separately. What the funder is saying is that if you get this funding, there will be particular reporting requirements that you will have. And the reporting requirements actually deals with M&E. You have to produce narrative reports, you have to produce financial reports, you have to produce a closeout report at the end of it, that provides comprehensive impact, and then you need ethical reporting. So let me pause there and just talk for a second, see if there are any questions that you want to talk about at this stage. I want to emphasize that your application, your project plan is a logical flow from the problem to the objectives, to the activities, to the milestones, the work plan, to the KPIs, which then link to your monitoring and evaluation, to your budget. All of them, they flow logically. You can't have a problem statement and then objectives that are unrelated to your problem statement. You can't have objectives and then have a work plan that works around your objectives. Every activity that you do in your work plan feeds back to your problem, to your objectives, and your objectives feed back into your problem statement. Which is why I do the executive summary at the end, because I want to make sure that all of those flow into the budget. When you look at the budget, everything you ask for in the budget must be found in your work plan. Everything that you're asking, all the money that you're asking for, must be found in what you're actually measuring as your impact, as your outcomes. And all of those go all the way back to your problem statement. So they're not disconnected. It's a very, very logical flow that you're actually looking at. Any comments, anything to share? And then I'm just going to show you very quickly what the funder is asking for in terms of. So this is the reporting requirement, right? For monitoring and evaluation, they want monitoring and reported on the funded project outputs, outcomes, and impact. And so, output, I have a newsletter. Outcomes, 66% of the people who got the newsletter actually read it. Impact is further down the line. The newsletter begins to change the community conversation. I have anecdotal evidence that the newsletter was used for community engagement. I have anecdotal evidence that the newsletter is now being shared in women's groups. I have evidence that the newsletter was used by a community group to request funding for water because there isn't water in a particular area, etc. So the outcomes, and the impact, that's part of the monitoring and evaluation process. What you have to do is you have to tell them what your outputs were, what your outcomes were, and then to start collecting evidence of impact. Very often, evidence of impact is anecdotal, people telling you stories of how of the impact of your work, but it can also be tangible in the sense that your newsletter, for example, could be submitted by an NGO to all the members of parliament or to the MEC in the area. So this is after you receive the funding. You have these reporting requirements. After you receive the funding, you will be expected to make a narrative report twice a year that includes your milestones and your deliverables according to the indicators that you've given to the fund, right? Financial reports, you need to have accurate financial reports detailing the use of funds. That's why the Fray Media Foundation has been spending so much time helping community media and actually independent media really become compliant, because we recognize that the bigger funding that we need in order to build sustainable media really needs financial compliance. and just the ability to be able to keep track of what you're spending, keep track of what you're getting, to be able to even measure trends in how money is coming in and money is going out becomes really important. At the end of the year, you need to have an impact report. And then if you are using generative AI or agentic AI, you must then also be able to really report on how that has impacted your work. So, Valent and Chris, we're going to move on to budget now. So really, really happy if um, if 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 there are any questions in the chat, if you let me know, and then we'll just talk about the budget.
There's nothing. Thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you. So as I was telling you our own story of finalizing the budget for a big proposal that we'd been shortlisted for, and then realizing as we were finalizing the budget that we needed to go back to our narrative and make sure that what we had put in the budget was clearly reflected in the narrative as something we would do. So for me, um, budgeting is always the hardest. You don't want to over budget and then budget yourself out of getting um, a, 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 a grant. But at the same time, you don't want to under budget and discover that other people who have much smaller projects than you have been given more money in order to face their projects. And so for me, the challenge is how do you realistically cost what you're doing? And I often start off by writing down every single activity, even if the activity isn't in our milestones. Then, what do we need? We need a writer. We need an editor. Sometimes we don't cost for some things, and then we end up actually paying to get a grant. And by that I mean we under budget so much because we're thinking of the obvious things to ask for, and we forget about the core, what keeps our business going. um, will they pay for administration? Will they pay for telecommunications? Will they pay for right? What will they pay for? So when you look at the budget template, it really has a summary sheet, a data sheet, the budget detail, and then be able to move from there. With the budget detail, it literally is one row per item. And this is where it's important to really think about what are all of the associated costs. I don't just need a designer, I might also need photographs, a photographer to provide. Stock photographs very often aren't suitable for the kind of audiences we serve. They're very obviously not South African. They're very obviously not African. They don't have the kind of landscapes we have. So maybe in order to have a proper newsletter, I need to hire a photographer who's going to go out and take photographs in the community that I can use as stock photographs in my newsletter. I need a designer. I need some people might want to have the newsletter printed. So, do I need printing? I would literally go down and make a list of every single thing. Some of those things, one of the things that you can sometimes do, and I don't think it's necessary for this, but for other projects like to see that you're carrying some of the costs yourself. And when I'm doing that, then I really am thinking through precisely what are all of the costs associated with this. I'm carrying the rent, I'm carrying the Wi-Fi costs, these are all the costs that I'm carrying. These are all the costs I'm asking you to carry. So when you go to the budget, you obviously have to make your own copy of the budget. Make a copy, give it a name, and then you can start filling it in. Um, it 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 uh, it helps you in terms of just really drawing out things to the different areas. If necessary, ask an accountant or ask somebody to just review your numbers. There are a couple of tips though that I want to think of. Make time to think about the activities and the costs associated with all of those activities. Make sure that your narrative and your budget numbers actually match so that every cost is connected clearly to an activity in your project plan. right? Because that's what people will do. If you're asking for 20,000 Rand to have a social media campaign, I'm going to go to your narrative and see what the objectives for your social media campaign are going to be. Um, and I'm going to look at your thinking. If you're paying 20,000 Rand for a social media campaign, my immediate thought is, well, that is just too much money for a social media campaign. Are you going to have a campaign every month? Are you going to have a campaign every week? What are you going to do? The reviewers will check for alignment. If it's in the budget, it should be in your work plan, right? Stay within your funding tier cap. um, Double check the maximum amount you can request, right? And don't be realistic. So the funding gap is you're starting your foundational digital capacity, it's up to 380,000 per year. You're growing your digital reach for expansion, 950 per year. You're engaging up to 1.9 million a year for advanced innovation and revenue models. Stay within those funding tiers. Don't and I guess it's a bit of a flag if you end up with precisely 1.9 million in your request, right? I mean, it's fine to come in under, it's fine. Remember, it's up to, it's not that you have to apply for 380. It's up to 380. It's not that you have to apply for 950. It's up to 950. So just think about that. And then, so you're applying for 1 year. Multi-year funding is possible only subject to your performance. Group your costs. You've got personnel costs, you've got technology costs, you've got travel costs, you've got outreach costs, you've got overheads, and keep the descriptions quite simple and transparent. Right? Why are these costs associated with the project? If they are big costs, for example, if you've got training fees, if you've got digital tools, if you've got part-time staff that you need to bring in, show why the cost is necessary. Put notes in your budget. I mean, it's something that our finance manager does all the time, and we find it so useful. We find it useful when we are going through our budget and we're checking to think what her understanding is. The funder finds it useful because they can very clearly see this money here speaks to this part in the narrative. You need to balance, right, the big ask with efficiency. Nobody wants to throw money at people and see the money wasted. And so you want to show value for money. You want to be able to show that you have big plans, but you're also able to do those big plans in a way that's very efficient, shows real value for money. You're going to be looking at you're going to be careful with every single dollar that they're giving you, every single rand that they're giving you. When you looking at the budget, this is what I'm also thinking of. Think about, what do you need for sustainability down the line? When you get this funding, what other funding are you going to bolster it with? If you are, particularly for those of us applying, for those of you applying at the higher tiers, you've got to show that co-funding. You've got to really show that that you are covering costs that contribute to the sustainability of your organization. I want to just double check, and it's something that we can certainly ask the fund, is whether or not we can include a contingency. I always think that having a contingency is important, because very often donors allow a 10% variation in your line items, which means that you can spend you can overspend or underspend by 10% in each line item, which gives you some flexibility of not having to spend precise amounts. And then before you actually produce and submit, you need to just double check your numbers, right? So you make sure that your budget period matches your project timeline, matches what you are promising them. For those of you, let me just remind that the applications close on the 28th of September, and the applications actually go into are emailed as much as possible. So let's pause again and just check if there are any particular questions, anything that people want to ask. So Peter,
Is from sorry.
no, thanks, Valenta. I was just going to say, so Peter was asking about the
Yes.
project application form. Absolutely, Peter. So actually, if you, so the project application form is in fact that very, very logical framework that we've gone through now, where the project is going to ask you for your executive summary. It's going to ask you for the for the so the project application form, the application guide, right? So you've got the project plan, you've got your budget, and then you've got the application process. Assuming you are in the second phase, it has a very detailed form that includes you having to upload quite a lot of documentation, etc. The project application guide goes through this in a lot of detail. I just want to make sure. Yeah. So this is the project application. Just quickly. Peter, was there anything specific around the application form that you had queries for? Go ahead and ask.
Thanks, Paula. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Yeah, the one question that I needed to understand is in terms of where it says business plan, it doesn't say much more than that. So a lot of us is obviously in a phase where we are reinventing ourselves and our businesses. So when I started my newspaper 18 years ago, I have a hard copy business plan that I've probably looked at 5 times in the last 18 years. The business plan that is referred to on the application form, what can you speak to that? What is it that they would need? Is it the mix of where you're at and where you want to be? Is it what you've done up to date, or the old plan, or a new plan, or a mix of the two, in other words?
Thanks. And I'm actually going to ask Kate if Kate can answer that. Sorry, Kate, to give you a hospital pass.
No problem. Look, the thing is that actually, Peter, I've got to get more input from Shikalulu on that one. To be honest, I don't want to give you, like an answer where I haven't actually got the information. So thank you. I mean, it's a very, very good question. So I will get back to everybody on that one. Once I've had a chat, to Shikalulu. So yeah, I'll get back to you today. I'll speak to Leanne Kunz. Thanks.
That will be useful. Thank you, Kate.
Chris?
Obviously, we don't have the answers, but I just want to understand from Peter, where is it referenced in the guide of where is the word business plan referenced in the guide, so that at least Kate can carry this across and point to it in Chukululu, because I've done a scrape now of the application guide and I've control F find the word business plan. I don't see it referenced. So perhaps you have information that we don't know of.
There's an application form. I don't know if that is, it says Digital News Transformation Fund Project Application Form Phase 2 that I'm looking at.
Okay. All right. I think Kate might give you feedback afterwards, because I don't see any place where it asks for a business plan. It's just the project plan, just for clarity.
So just to jump in here, because the thing is that Peter, what was interesting was when the forms were being designed initially, there was discussions around business plans, and then I kind of looked at it again, and I was like, gosh, okay, it doesn't seem to be there anymore. It's like they've refined it further. So, but it's important. Let me get to the bottom of this one and get back to everyone on it. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, when you look at the application guide, I mean, one of the things that's really interesting is that when you look at the assessment scoring process, 15, the big points go towards alignment with the objectives of the fund, right? So revenue generation, revenue sustainability, revenue diversification, audience engagement, all of that. That's 15 points. And so you've got 15 points for alignment with the objectives, 15 points for innovative use of technology, 15 points for sustainability and revenue potential, and 15 points for feasibility and readiness. That 15, the 15 points for feasibility and readiness is your project plan, is your timelines, is your budget. So in the project plan alone, you already see the bulk of the points, right? And then the other points come from organizational capacity. So can you do this? That's why I was saying, you know, if you've done something on a smaller scale before, be sure to tell them. 10 points for organizational capacity, 10 points for audience reach, 10 points for diversity and inclusion, 10 points for impact and learning potential, right? So even the idea that they could learn from what you've done is important. So really think about that. Think about, you know, what are you really looking at for your project plan for phase 2. You have got to submit the application form, the project plan, 10 pages, your online budget using the template, your organizational documents, legal registration, founding documents, governance structures, documents for all governing members, your press council proof, your SARS compliance PIN, your proof of address, and then you have financial documentation that you could give. So quite a bit of things, but you can see, right? I mean, the way that they're actually assessing it really comes down to your ability to show something that is practical and that will end up being sustainable down the line. So let me go back. I have just, Kate, go ahead.
So Peter just actually sent a message to show that we do need a business plan. And Paula, I would really love your input on this one. I know that actually putting together a business plan is a lot of work. And I'm just wondering in terms of the amount of time available for this application, because what are we, the 18th, and it's got to be in by the 28th. I'm wondering whether we shouldn't actually say to Shikalulu that to have a full business plan on top of all the work that we need to do now, I'm not sure if that's fair, to be honest. And I would love your kind of professional opinion on that, because I'm very happy to go to Shikalulu and say, actually, you know, I mean, I think we just have to be honest. I don't think all of us have business plans. I mean, some people will, but a lot of people might not. So yeah, and again, I'm sorry to put you on the spot in terms of giving us, but it just is, I'm just worried about the amount of work required and the amount of time. Yeah, thanks.
So first of all, I think if we're going to do proper business plans that have meaning, then 2 weeks is not sufficient to do a proper business plan that has meaning. And I think that people who have business plans can certainly submit this in order to show how the project plan actually contributes to the business plan. But I think a good project plan very often is a really good point as a starting point for a business plan. And I think that what I would recommend, Kate, is that Shikalulu, actually, if you get accepted without a business plan, your year 2 application for further funding will need a business plan.
Very helpful. Thank you. Thanks.
Peter, go ahead.
Can I just add, thanks, Kate, to that, and that's exactly what I've mentioned now on the chat group, Paula, is the fact that time is way too short. I mean, many of us are going to deadline week, and I'm somehow just sprung on me now the fact that it asks for a business plan, which is madness. So it would be very useful if we even know by end of today what Shikalulu says, because that's going to kill a few of us if this is what is asked the 10 days before the time.
So Kate, I really would say that year 2 application must be accompanied by a business plan. But year 1, because this really might even be for a lot of people proof of concept.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Peter, I promise you, I will speak to Leanne Kunz today and get back to you with an answer. Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Just having a look. Actually, Claire, yes, I am going to. I've already sent the presentation to Valen, and so I think everyone will get a copy of it. And really, I mean, if there are other elements that we subsequently need to understand, I'm sure we could have a 30-minute or even an hour-long one. Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I am looking at the application document here, and it says with the financials, we need audited financial statements here for us to submit. And I was wondering, for those whose businesses were not doing well for the past 6 months or so, or even a year, are you still going to require those audited statements? Yeah, because I think most of us would not have such. Thank you. That's my question.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to hand that question over to Kay, but I just wanted to be very, very clear that I have nothing to do with the fund. I'm not associated with the fund in any way. I have no say on the fund. And I'm just here today to kind of support the application process as someone who has sat on a lot of panels and knows what people often look for the panels. I just needed to clarify that. But Kate, I know that there is a 3-tiered documentation that they're looking for. Kate, again, I'm not sure if someone from AIP could just confirm, because not everyone needs to do audited. I think some people can just do management reports.
Yeah. So just also want to again confirm exactly what Paula was saying about Paula's role. I reached out to Paula because I knew that she had incredible experience, in the sector and around funding issues, and had all the training experience. And I just wanted Paula to assist all of us with these applications. But exactly as Paula's saying, she does not have any role in the fund. It was me reaching out because I knew that she had amazing experience to assist us. So yeah. So I just want to confirm that. And then, yes, in terms of the financial requirements, my understanding is, and I'm going to get, again, more written input from Shikalulu on this one, but you don't need audited financials. I mean, we, as AIP, you were very specific with Shikalulu in terms of saying that is going to be a real problem for our members, and it's going to be very expensive, and we don't want our members to have to incur those kind of costs, or any small publishers. I mean, it's not just all about AIP members. My understanding is it's management accounts. There are various categories that they've said are people can actually so if you don't have this, then you can do this. So their management accounts, their bank statements, etc. I need to just get that clarified, and we will basically send a document specifically with that. So in fact, those are 2 things that I need to get to everybody by the end of the day, is the business plan one, but also a little bit more information and clarity on that one. But I think, Chris, you were looking at it quite closely. I'd love your input on that if you have, because I think you could definitely contribute. Thanks, Paula.
All right, Kate, just a disclaimer, I don't work for Chikululu. I'm also a publisher and also project leader for projects. So I've put in the chat box just a screenshot of the financial documents that they've put out there. And I see that there's 2 options. A is obviously the one with the audited financials, and option B is the one of the management account. But I think one thing that I need to highlight there is the signed by an accountant / chief financial officer. So I think that also needs to be clarified as well, Kate, in terms of if you have option B, of you can produce those bank statements, how do you go by getting it signed? Could we perhaps just send it through to the police station to get an affidavit that this is really your account? Will that suffice? Because I don't think many people might have access to an accountant or chief financial officer for its signature. But then again, it's really up to what they will put on the table as an official, official feedback. So that's the only thing that I scrutinized regarding this question.
I just added in that there's a third option, obviously option C. And I think, Kate, they also align to the tiers. So if you're the lower tier, you don't need the audited because you kind of start up. And so if we could clarify also if this is against tiers. I do want to say that I absolutely agree that if you are a publisher, you need a separate bank account. A very, very clear bank account for your entity. Yeah. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, no, good afternoon, colleagues. Paula, thanks very much for the effort. You were very clear. I'm looking forward to get the audio so that I can also go through it very slowly, writing down whatever you've been teaching us. It's going to be very valuable when we're completing the phase 2, I must say. So, but at the same time, Kate, it goes back to what I was talking to you yesterday to say there's no way that Tukululu can get away with this. They have to organize another seminar because we have to be honest. Paula cannot able to know exact details. Like the question that I got, not only once, maybe 3 publishers who don't have active business account. They are ready to open a new one now. So if they were here, I was supposed to ask them if they open a new business account today, they don't have 6 months, it's still fairly new. Will it be sufficient for them to apply or not? So those kind of questions, I think we definitely need Kululu as well, so that I don't know if it will be possible or not, but we can appreciate if you can able to assist us in this regard.
I don't know if anyone from AIP wants to comment on that.
Paula, I'm sorry, I just dropped off the call for some reason. I lost power.
Yeah.
So I missed that question. I literally have just gone on in the moment. Sorry, was
Yeah.
there? Yeah.
So,
what's the question?
So Eric was asking that if we can have another kind of session with Tikululu, only because, for example, he says he knows of at least 3 publishers who don't have active business accounts, and even if they go and open up their business account now, they won't have 3 to 6 months of business account to be able to show them. So if we could get Tikululu to come back and maybe just chat about that. Eric, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add?
No, Paula, I think you submitted very well. Yes, that is the main question. Yeah, yes.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. No problem. Let me again go back to them and ask them about those issues. Yeah, I know there were some particular things that they talked about in terms of it being really, really important that people had business accounts. Mm-hmm. That there was no ways that they could give funding to an entity without a business account. If you had a personal account and you wanted funding to be distributed to a personal account, that would immediately create huge problems for them. And I think literally in terms of their auditing and finance regulations, they would not be able to basically fund operations that didn't have a business account. But I think you're answering something a bit more nuanced about a business account that is in existence, but because of financial problems is inactive. So let me just check on that one. But the issue is that if people don't have business accounts, I think what that means is that you unfortunately will not be able to apply during this round. There are multiple rounds. And the fund is open for 3 years, but unfortunately you would have to step aside for this round, because I don't think there's going to be any wiggle room around that. But certainly in terms of inactive accounts, let me check on that one. No problem.
And can I just, so Fray Media Foundation also gives grants to people, and we just can't give it to a personal account. It has to go to a bank account, because we then have to report back to the people who give us the money for grants, and it has to be a separate bank account. And so one of the things that I would just encourage is just to, even now, open a bank account so that at least you've got it going forward. Even if you're going to apply in the next round, just the other reason why it's a good idea to have a bank account is because having a separate bank account also allows you to see what you're getting money in for and what you're spending money for. But if you mix it up with your personal stuff, it becomes really difficult to be able to see those differences. But if we can get clarity on that, Kate, I think it would be really, really useful for everyone, just in terms of the financial audited reports. I see that level 1 doesn't need audited reports, they just need financial statements that have been reviewed, and bank statements for the last 6 months. I mean, one of my companies is a CC, and we don't do audited reports, but we do get annual financials. And then the college is audited, and that is extremely expensive. And I would imagine is something that they can only really demand for the people applying for the 1.9. Can I say though that if audited accounts are a requirement, you can put the cost of your audit into the funding application. That's what we do. When a funder wants us to provide them with audited reports after a project, we put the cost of an audit into our funding application, so that the audit is actually paid for by the funder requiring the audit. So just for you to know that going forward. Yeah. Okay. So really, I mean, I think any more questions, please put them in the chat. But I would wrap up by saying, when you look at that process, you can see where they are, where the elements are that they're going to be looking at specifically, and that will make you stand out. I want to start off by saying, don't go over the 10-page limit. It just becomes unworthy. And the reason why I'm saying this is because it's quite clear that when you're doing something with ChatGPT, and again, I say this not because I'm saying don't do it with ChatGPT. I'm just saying ChatGPT is only your tool. You know the context, you know your community, you know your project, you know your problem statement. You must take what you get, and you must edit it, and you must use it wisely. But when you're doing stuff with ChatGPT just keeps on writing and writing, and a lot of it doesn't get to the heart of what you need to get to. So please, if you're using AI, really be clear about what you want to get from it. So stick to the 10-page limit. Make sure that your budget and your objectives and your activities all match. Go back and forth. Get somebody to have a look at it and double check. Focus on the impact, right? If you're not getting money just to get your community newspaper to go online. You're getting money to get your community newspaper to go online to serve an audience that is increasingly operating in a news desert, where printing is just too expensive, where we're all dependent on social media for news and information, and we're not getting valuable, verified information about our own communities. So focus on impact. Who benefits? How will the people in your community actually change? Right? Make it very specific. Don't make vague promises of, increasing access to information. No, I'm going to be writing stories that impact my community ahead of the local elections or whatever, and making sure that people have real information to make decisions. Show sustainability. Build into your project elements that will make you sustainable down the line. If you have increased visibility, use that visibility to get other funders. If you are creating an app, create the app in a way that other people can fund, that other people can take advantage of it. If you are collecting community contacts, think about how you can use a community contacts to actually start an online community, etc. So really show sustainability after your grant. don't overpromise. As somebody who's overpromised, right? We've had real issues that where you have to come back, and then you have to deliver. It's really, really difficult. So think about that. What you want to do. Um, the other thing that I would say is, what makes you special? What do you have that other media don't have? What is your strength? Show why you and your organization can deliver. Show how you've delivered before, other things you've done. Show how this is a stepping stone of growth for you. People want to see that you can actually deliver down the line. So I think it's really important that, for me, the most important thing is to be practical. Don't get too excited about the fact that it's 1.9. Focus on what can you do, what do you want to do, how do you want to do it. I'm going to share in the chat from Valen. So this is a compliance webinar, and um, you can go and have a look at it. We had two really incredible speakers. We had Chris, Nigel Magamu from Chat 263 in Zimbabwe, who started his own business, so really, really understands what it's like. I'm trying to hustle for money. And then we had Fray College's finance manager, who just was incredibly practical. If you need to get a SARS certificate, this is where you go. If you need to do this, this is where you go. So it's a really, really practical webinar. So I'm going to just leave it there. And Chris, I'm going to hand over to you and then back to Kate.
All right, thank you so much, Paula. And I think I also want to just maybe ask a question, Paula, as well. I see it hasn't really come up, especially just tying it in with the budget and also tying it in with the project plan. All right, so the human capacity, how do you actually tabulate that in your budget? Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that the fund facilitates a task will yield to an objective. And how would you put that? Would you put that as stipends, as compensation for extra work? Perhaps just the language around that from a funding point of view. And I think also just to make sure that it ties back into the operational plan to say, if we don't have the actual fund, we would not be able to reach the goal that we are setting out to do. So I think maybe you can just unpack that.
So, and this is something that we also learned the hard way. When you're applying for funding, for example, for a project, one of the things that we forget about is the time we spend as the managers, as the editors on that project. And I'll give you an example. If you're applying for the development of an app for your thing, so you might be the CEO of your organization, you might be the publisher, and you're not necessarily the developer. So you're going to budget for a developer, either a consultant or a full-time person. You're going to budget for somebody to write stories for the app, and maybe etc. And that's fine. So you're going to ask for staff for a year, for a position for a year, or a consultant for 6 months or whatever. What you also have to do is to recognize that Chris, as the CEO, is going to spend over the next year, because this is going to be the flagship project that you're doing. Chris is going to spend 25% of his time on this project. Or maybe he's going to do 30% of his time on this project. But you need to estimate how much time you're going to spend overseeing the project, writing the report, ensuring that the milestones are reached. And then you can't claim for your salary, Chris, but you can claim for 30% of your time. And that basically means that it frees you up not to be constantly hustling to get money to pay your salary. So I think that's the one thing. Personnel, don't only think about the new people that have to come in order to deliver what you need to do, but also the percentage of time that existing people will take. So for example, if you've got a marketing person, maybe 10% of their time is going to be spent on marketing this, or in the entire year, maybe it's only one day a month or whatever, but really think about who's going to work on this, the marketing person, the salesperson, etc., so that you actually make sure that you've got all of those people involved in the process. And this is something we didn't do in the beginning, and which meant that all the senior people in the team were working on projects that they weren't being paid for, and then they were still having to generate income in order to cover their salaries. So that's the thing that I would think about. And then you have to explain, right? Chris is going to do oversight. Chris is going to ensure. Chris is responsible for monitoring and evaluation, for milestones, for report writing, or whatever. If you're in the budget, then you're in the narrative explaining what you're doing, Chris. Again, and this actually a donor told me, I would be very specific. I would say we're going to spend 100 Rand on a banner, and we're going to spend 200 Rand on pamphlets, and we're going to spend 300 Rand on whatever. And the donor said, the problem that when you're that specific, particularly when you're getting funding from organizations that have rules about all changes to the budget need to be signed off, then you create problems for yourself. And so she said to me, she said, put all of these things under a banner. So you say promotional items, and then you can say in the promotional items, pamphlets, banners, blah, 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 and give an overhead amount, right? And what means is that if you suddenly decide that we're going to use the same banner the whole year through, but we're going to have more pamphlets than we thought before, you don't have to get it written that you can actually change. You can simply just change it. And it also, when you have small line items like 200 Rand for a banner, as opposed to 2,000 Rand for promotional items, when you allow that flexibility of being 10% over or 10% under, that's really significant. If banners suddenly go up by 20% because America has imposed tariffs, then you end up, you're over the budget already, and you've got to get a written kind of permission to change the budget. And so that was the other thing that I also learned, to cluster, to group everything so that you weren't being too specific, to make sure that even the staff who weren't directly involved in the project but who needed to actually support the project were there. You would want to have a look and see if there's an administration cost. In other words, can you put in your telecommunications? If the fact that you've got a big project means that you've got to have Wi-Fi as opposed to data, can you put in the cost of Wi-Fi for a year? Can you put in the cost of phones? So you just have a line item that says telecommunications, 2,000 Rand, and in telecommunications is Wi-Fi, phones, etc., etc. So really look at issues like that, where you can cluster things, what you can put in. I don't think in this particular fund you can actually ask for a project management fee, but usually project management fee would be anything from 10 to 20%, depending on how big the project management would be. So, Chris, does that help?
Yes, thank you so much. It does, and I think just to add on to that, for the actual individuals working in the publication, how would you word that? Because obviously you're not wanting to pay for their salary. You want to pay for the extra work that they'll be doing as a result of this project. So I know I'm going into too much granular here because I think based on the last training session that we had, it was mainly about, it's not about capacity building of getting new people, but actually skilling or giving them extra. So I'm thinking, how would you actually put that in the budget to say for journalists, for content contribution or content writing, this is how much we would actually put down per. We do that perhaps as well.
So I have to say that because that very often donors don't want you paying your staff over and above, right? I mean, if they're staff members, then they don't want to see that extra. They can see a contribution to salary, and sometimes they will ask for evidence or proof of salary. They might ask for contracts or whatever to that. What you could do, is to say, you can budget for work days. So you can say journalists, as and when needed, 40 work days through the year at 500 Rand a day or something. And then that can be either freelancers or it can be either freelancers or it can be your own staff that you're paying in addition, right? And then you don't put people specifically. But I would say, yeah, rather do that, and then you can pay people a shift for extra, an editing shift, a journalism shift, etc. Sometimes, if we're applying for a contract, we would, rather than ask for a percentage of salary, we would calculate people's daily rate. And this is also something that I learned from working with international NGOs. When we calculate people's daily rate, so assuming somebody earns 10,000 Rand a month, we know that they are, or let's say, just for it's easier for me to be able to calculate, let's say somebody earns 11,000 Rand a month, and we know that there are 22 work days in a month. There's a tendency to then divide 11,000 by 22 days. Which would then give you, what is it, 500 Rand a day. But the reality is that somebody's salary is not that monthly amount, because they go on leave, they're entitled to sick leave, they're entitled to UIF, they're entitled to a whole lot of other things. And so what you would do is you would actually calculate the overall cost of somebody. So even if they were being paid 10,000 Rand a month, it's not 120,000 Rand a year, because you then have to put in the cost of their leave, the cost of the UIF, and anything else that you add to it. And so even though they're earning 11,000 Rand a month, their daily rate that you would charge a donor would in fact be 550 or something like that. So, I mean, these are the things, not necessarily for this application, but just for you to know that when you move from this and go on to bigger applications like EU applications, etc., that the daily rate of somebody's salary is not calculated simply by how much you pay them a month divided by 22, but by the actual full cost to the company. Yeah, good. I think that's it. I'm going to hand back to Chris to do the closure and to say thank you very much, you guys. It was a really interesting question and lots of stuff to take back just to get clarity on. But good luck for all of you who are applying.
Right. Thank you so much, Paula. Your contribution is always valuable and very informative. And we'd like to just say thank you for availing yourself and also for unpacking other scenarios. And one big takeout I'd like to say from this session is that just like it was quoted yesterday, you can't scale chaos. So I think this fund, especially with the first window opening, it really is a matter of us putting our business in order if it's not in order, and also look at it as once you do the work now, it's actually going to be an asset for not just this fund, but other funds that might arise, and also open up your mind as well into looking outside of this fund and perhaps looking at the funds like Paula mentioned. Sometimes they do funds as the Paula Foundation, as the Fray Foundation, and also others as well. So Paula, thank you so much. And I don't know if Kate would like to just give a closing word, but thank you so much for allowing us to get our businesses in order, because we are in the business of news.
So, I mean, I think, Chris, you've done a brilliant job. So it's just to say huge thank you to you. Thank you to Paula, and thank you to everyone who was part of this call. And I will get back to you with all the information that you requested. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.